Welcome to Hardfire. I'm Ronald WIECK. My guest is Scott FENSTERMAKER, an attorney for 2 or perhaps 3 of the Guantanamo detainees. This is the first part of a 2-part edition of Hardfire. We're going to discuss the strategy that the defense will use for their clients, and we will discuss briefly the events of 9/11. We will try to focus on the Bush administration's policies that were put into effect as a result of these attacks. Mr. FENSTERMAKER came to my attention and to that of, I assume, millions of viewers when he appeared on Bill O'Reilly's show at the end of November. David Horowitz wrote on his blog a fairly inflammatory comment about my guest. I'll read part of it. Last night, Bill O'Reilly had a representative of the traitor class in his crosshairs, an episode he revisited tonight. The traitor class is easily defined as people who can't identify a self-declared enemy of the United States even after he has killed 3,000 innocent people in an act of self-described holy war, and is prepared to provide his talents and services gratis to help the enemy combatant attack this own country. Scott FENSTERMAKER is an attorney for Covington Burling, a white shoe law firm which has provided millions of dollars in pro bono legal work to Gitmo terrorists. Well, first of all, you contend that you're not associated with Covington Burling.
I'm not, and I never have been in any way.
I see. Would you explain where David Horowitz may have gotten this idea? What is the association?
Well, I think at one point in time, Covington and Burling had a news release on their website, which essentially said that I was working with one of their partners to assist one of my clients at Guantanamo Bay, and presumably Mr. Horowitz misread that, the news blurb, in order to assume that I was an employee or a partner at Covington and Burling, which I am not and never have been.
I see. Are you a member of any prominent firm, or are you pretty much a lone wolf?
I'm a lone wolf, I guess you could say.
All right. Well, okay. You've been called a representative of the traitor class. Now, I assume you don't regard yourself as a traitor, so you don't wear that as a badge of honor. Do you understand, though, why people might make the assumption that someone who is terribly concerned with the alleged rights of an enemy that struck us without warning and committed a great deal of mayhem would be perceived as a traitor?
Oh, certainly. I think any time a criminal defense attorney is doing his or her job, it could be perceived as a traitor or an enemy of our society.
Okay. Would you describe yourself as belonging to that fairly large group on the far left? For colloquial purposes, we'll call them the Blame America First crowd.
I don't think so. I wouldn't consider myself to be on the far left. I'm a lifelong Republican and regularly voting Republican. I consider myself to be quite conservative, actually.
That's interesting. In other words, did you support Ronald Reagan in
the first president I ever voted for was President Reagan. It was my first election in 1980, and I voted Republican every election except 2008.
You voted for Bush in 2004.
I didn't vote in 2004. I voted for Bush in 2000. Yes.
Interesting. I mean, that's certainly not something I would have expected. My problem with the notion of defending the Guantanamo detainees is that the province seems to be wrong one way or another. You were at pains on Ed Morrissey's Hot Air blog to distinguish what happened on 9/11 from murder.
Exactly.
You really felt that this term was being hurled promiscuously, and you wanted to make a distinction between the deaths of these people and murder.
Well, I think that there's a number of reasons for that. First of all, in our society, murder has a very specific meaning, and it's jurors in a trial who hear the evidence and make a determination as to whether or not a victim has been murdered and whether or not a defendant is in fact the murderer of that victim. In addition to that, it's far from clear to me that irrespective of our legal system, whether the people who died on September 11th were in fact murdered or killed for some other reason. I certainly...
Yeah, now that's a distinction that's worth exploring. Granted that these people are dead, and they were civilians. They were killed in what the jihadists themselves would describe as an act of holy war. So if you view your clients as combatants, as holy warriors, which I assume is their preference, what is this doing in the American criminal justice system? Why isn't it more proper to try these people before a military tribunal?
Well, you refer to the defendants as jihadists, and I'm not sure that that's exactly what they are. And also,
would any of them dispute that that designation?
I don't know. I've never had that conversation with any of them. The only one of the 5 defendants with whom I've had any conversations has never mentioned that he's a jihadist or that this was an act of war or that they were killed in any sort of holy war or having anything to do with religion in any way.
Well, what does he think he's doing in Guantanamo? I mean, surely he didn't say, you know, I'm a salesman. Auto insurance and term life, and suddenly there I am with my attaché case, and these special ops guys come down, and I don't know. I thought they wanted to discuss their coverage. I mean,
well,
what happened?
Reading between the lines, I think he thinks he's serving as a prop in America's war on terror. But I think that the reason that he believes that he was apprehended is that government wants to make an example out of him and use him as fuel for their fire, their propaganda fire.
Now, can you mention his name and tell us where he was apprehended?
I actually don't know where he was apprehended, but I assume it was in Pakistan. It's never really been a focus of my interaction with him, but his name is Amar al-Baluchi. And he's
okay, it wasn't a battlefield in Afghanistan, in other words.
I actually don't know. I've never spoken to him about that.
I see, because it has seemed to me, again, I've never visited Guantanamo, but from what I read, apparently the detainees are proud of their allegiance to jihad, to this version of radical Islam that professes to seek a cleansing of Islam, to restore it to its former glories. I don't know of any of these so-called terrorists who have denied involvement with jihad.
My client has never denied involvement in the September 11th attacks. I don't know if that's part of any jihad or part of any religious affiliation in any way. I do believe he's a Muslim, but he's never mentioned that this was done to further Islam in any way.
I mean, is there any chance that he's not a Muslim?
I think the chance that he's not a Muslim is slim. I think that the chance that it wasn't part of Islam that he did this or part of to further Islam in any way is higher.
Okay, now here's something that you wrote on the Hot Air blog, and you've taken a lot of flack for this, so I think you should certainly have the opportunity to explain yourself.
Sure.
You wrote to Ed Morrissey, by the way, please tell your subscribers that I still don't know who attacked the World Trade Center, and yes, I still don't care. From the perspective of those who died, it makes very little difference who killed them. From the perspective of everyone else, it's frankly none of their business, unless they sit on the jury, of course. Print that loud, wide, and clear. I confess to being a little bit mystified here. Shouldn't I care who attacked the World Trade Center?
Well, first I should explain that that quote was actually in response to a similar quote that I had made previously on his blog, and it apparently created some consternation amongst his readers about the fact that I didn't care who attacked the World Trade Center. So that, what you just read, was a response to their consternation and basically condemnations of me.
You know, repeated that you still don't care.
Right.
But frankly, I'm not sure where you're coming from.
Well, my only involvement in this issue is from the perspective of being my client's attorney. I'm not really involved in this as a citizen or as a person. I mean, normally I would just go about doing my daily activities, but I'm only here as my client's attorney, and in that sense, it doesn't really matter to me who did it.
Okay, I can understand that from a professional point of view, having your client's rights in mind, and you are making a moral decision to place their rights above your allegiance, say, to the country, to this society. When you say that, frankly, it's none of their business, you're saying, in effect, it's none of the business of any of us. At Pearl Harbor, should we not care that it was specifically the Japanese who bombed our fleet, as opposed to, say, the Dutch or the Australians?
I think to a certain extent that in that sense it might be part of society's business, but I don't think that we're ever going to find out who did it.
Well, see, now that's where I have a problem. You've said that you really are unfamiliar with the 9/11 truth movement.
Correct.
You know, and
Correct.
I am familiar with the 9/11 truth movement. I've described it as an extraordinary confluence of stupidity, dishonesty, and sheer insanity. But these people insist, against all logic and evidence, that elements operating within the American government perpetrated these attacks. In the wake of 9/11, I mean, hours after the last plane crashed, a massive multi-agency investigation that included 7,000 agents from the FBI alone found out the identities of the 19 hijackers. They found them out very quickly. Names appear on flight manifests. Do you have any problem with that investigation? Do you think they missed something?
I don't know the first thing about the investigation. I know what we've been told happened, but I don't know what happened.
Well, again, you're expressing doubt. What does the doubt stem from? Just an overall distrust of the government?
The doubt stems from being an engineer and being an attorney and not having seen any evidence. The only evidence that I've seen as to who was involved in September 11th attacks was my client telling me that he was involved and the reason for it. That's the only evidence that I've ever seen.
Well, do you think, for example, that the passenger manifests were falsified?
Well, the fact that a passenger manifest, assuming that the passenger manifests were accurate, that doesn't mean that the people that they claim did it were in fact the perpetrators of it.
Well, you've got these 19 names appearing on the passenger manifests, and they correspond with known terrorists, people who belong to terrorist organizations. I should interrupt myself right there. Do you think it's fair to categorize members of Al-Qaeda, Hezbollah, Hamas as terrorists? Am I stealing a base, in other words?
Well, I think that you can characterize people however you'd like. I mean, I would argue that the United States military is a band of terrorists, and I know that that would be somewhat of a controversial position.
Yeah, but I would ask you to explain what you mean. I wouldn't simply denounce you and say, no, they're not. I would say, well, what do you mean?
They use the installation of terror in people to effectuate state ends.
But do you think that the United States military indiscriminately targets civilians, for example?
When it needs to, sure.
Wouldn't you say that there's significant evidence that American forces in both Iraq and Afghanistan have sustained heavier casualties than they needed to, simply out of perhaps an exaggerated concern for collateral damage?
I have no idea. I mean, that may be the case, but I personally have no idea.
Oh, look, to be frank, neither do I. I mean,
right.
Neither one of us has been there. But it seems from what I hear that we have rules of engagement that, to a significant degree, have hamstrung our forces. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what the precedent for that is. Certainly the Germans during World War II didn't care a great deal about how many civilians they killed. This is a problem, though. Again, if we refer to the American military as an agent of terrorism, we're saying that American foreign policy goals are in some way illegitimate.
Not necessarily. All I'm saying is that they use terrorism to effectuate those goals. That's all I'm saying. I mean, for instance, I think the best examples of that would be American firebombing in Germany and Japan during World War II and using nuclear weapons in World War II. Those are both terrorism-related means, but arguably they were justly oriented.
You're raising a very good point. I was going to ask you, for example, if American airmen over Dresden, for example, which in retrospect was not an important military target. I don't know the exact number of civilians killed. I've seen estimates of 60,000, 70,000. These men can't be regarded as terrorists because they're simply following orders that were given to them. I mean, in many cases, airmen would describe their revulsion, thinking about the carnage that the bombs they were dropping would cause.
That assertion is completely and categorically incorrect.
Why do you say that?
Because military personnel who are effectuating their orders cannot use that as a defense, and if that was a defense, then all the all the Nazis who were tried at Nuremberg would have been acquitted.
Okay, but again, I think you're making an improper distinction here. The Nazis were trying to exterminate a whole race of people. Now, on some level, they must have understood that this, even if it was supported by whatever bogus science they appeal to, whatever crackpot racial theories, they understood that in the eyes of the rest of humanity, this was a horrendous act. An American pilot dropping bombs on Dresden, for example, or on Hiroshima or Nagasaki, he's been told, this is your target. It's a military target. You're a member of the military. You really don't have the option to refuse to do it.
Well, I think in your question, you're focusing on the Holocaust and the German military's involvement in the Holocaust. The German military was involved in other war crimes beyond the Holocaust.
Yes,
and that's what I'm referring to.
Okay.
I'm not referring to the Holocaust, which clearly by anybody's definition is going to be a crime. I'm talking about invasions of Austria, Czechoslovakia, Poland, Russia. I mean, to me, there's no difference between what we're doing by invading Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, now Yemen as of last week, than what Germany did in invading the countries I just listed. There's no difference.
But surely you would have to acknowledge that for many Iraqis, the toppling of Saddam Hussein represents a liberation.
Perhaps.
I mean, I don't have Gallup poll numbers, but I'd venture a guess that the sizable majority of Iraqis, apart from people who benefited personally from association with the Ba'ath Party, or, you know, there are certainly some Sunnis in the Baghdad area, but overwhelmingly Iraq is happy that Saddam Hussein is gone.
Perhaps that may be the case, but I'm sure that there were a number of people in Austria, Czechoslovakia, Poland, and Russia who were glad to see their leaders gone. That doesn't make it right.
Yeah, I don't know, though. I mean, when Germany annexed Austria and Czechoslovakia, and when they crushed Poland in a bloody military campaign, it's inconceivable that anyone would view that as an attempt to liberate those people.
I think you're rationalizing.
Well, I mean, Polish Jews suffered most heavily of all Jews in Europe. I mean, again, this was a monstrous campaign of extermination. No one could reasonably claim that America is undertaking military operations in the Middle East to exterminate a race of people. Even if you're cynical about our stated goals, certainly we claim to be promoting Enlightenment ideals, democracy, freedom, equality. I mean, you can accuse the men who make these speeches of being insincere, but the sentiments they express, surely they're unobjectionable.
Assuming that they're sincere, they're unobjectionable.
Yeah.
If they're not sincere, then it raises
then it raises the question of what we're doing there. It's kind of interesting. I mean, so many of the 9/11 truthers talked about the war for oil in Iraq. Christopher Hitchens just wrote a piece. He talked about the auctions that were held for, I think, 7 major Iraqi oil fields. America did very poorly. I mean, companies from Sweden, Russia, China, they all did very well. So, I mean, if we invaded Iraq for oil, we didn't get it. I mean, it's time, I think, to bring the curtain down on that particular canard. I mean, we just didn't get it. I mean, whatever you think of George Bush, he didn't suspend any elections and he didn't declare martial law. He's gone. There are people in the truth movement who still cling to the idea that he's still in power. I mean, one guy I was in communication with on a blog, he said, "For us, George Bush will never be gone." And I think that summed it up pretty well. You said you voted for Bush in 2000. Your feelings toward him now, have they hardened into utter revulsion, or do you think he was misunderstood, or do you think he tried hard and didn't get things right? How would you characterize him?
I would characterize him as a war criminal.
And for what, though?
For waging aggressive war, just like the Nazis did, for encouraging torture, mistreatment of prisoners of war, for misleading the American public as to what our goals were and why we're there, what we're doing.
Well, would you differentiate between Afghanistan and Iraq?
No.
You wouldn't?
No. I think that's just propaganda. It's a sales job.
So imagine that you are the president in the September of 2001, and we've just sustained this devastating attack. I mean, from both an economic and an emotional standpoint, here the American homeland is attacked. Nearly 3,000 people are killed. What would you do?
Well, I think I'm sort of a disadvantage because I wasn't privy to the information that President Bush was at the time. But that raises two issues, and one is whether the information that he was provided was accurate, and whether there was enough consideration as to whether it was accurate in order to make an informed decision, and whether there were ulterior motives in what they had decided to do, irrespective of whether, if there was going to be an attack.
See, I was struck by some comments you made, your own personal reactions to the attacks on the World Trade Center. You might want to recount them for us here.
Well, I was very upset, and my wife and my oldest daughter were down there that day. My oldest daughter was a student at the Trinity Preschool at Trinity Church that morning. She was there. My wife and she were both there when the first plane hit, and my wife was outside on the street when the second plane hit. So
Did they see it?
They were both inside when the first plane hit, and when the second plane hit, my wife heard it but did not see it, and she ran back and got my daughter. She did not see it. She heard it.
Yeah, I was struck by the fact that you said this reduced you to tears.
Yeah, and for many months afterwards. I mean, the New York Times had short biographies of all the people that died, and I read those religiously for months, and my wife got me a book of a compilation of them. It was terrible.
So I'm having difficulty making the connection here. The people who claimed responsibility, the al-Qaeda terrorists, were operating training camps in Afghanistan, state-sanctioned training camps. Now, the Taliban obviously had the option of cooperating with our request to simply turn these people over. They refused to do so. Now, we're entitled to our opinion as to why they refused. My own view, I mean, from my vantage point on the political spectrum, I would say the Taliban was accustomed to dealing with the Clinton administration, and they expected that an American president in the face of this attack will bluster. He'll deliver an angry speech to the UN. He may lob a few cruise missiles into some vaguely defined site, and in a few weeks, everything will quiet down. The public memory is short. I mean, for an event as appalling as this, it's going to be a little longer than usual, but in 6 months, people won't be talking about 9/11 anymore. I would, again, editorialize, again, my own opinion. We'll never be able to prove it. I think that's what would have happened if Al Gore had been president. Now, they didn't reckon with George Bush. I mean, do you find that implausible?
Well, I think a number of your premises are not necessarily accurate, but if you accept those premises as accurate, then perhaps you're right. I mean, you say that the terrorist training camps, well, first of all, I wouldn't necessarily say that they're terrorists in the first place, and they may be training camps, but we have terrorist training camps all throughout our state-sanctioned terrorist training camps throughout our country.
But if these training camps include mock-ups of commercial airliners, they're not training for military activities. They're not doing rifle drills. They're not training for combat on a battlefield. They're training for a very specific attack targeting civilians. Now, that, again, that is what defines them as terrorists.
Okay.
And again, the Taliban has the option of saying, okay, we can see that in the eyes of the world, this was an atrocity, and we would like to distance ourselves from it. I feel that they felt under no pressure to do so. They felt there would simply be no consequences for refusing our request. As it turned out, they were wrong.
Well, you've stated a number of facts that I don't know to be true, but I'm not saying that because I believe that they're false, just because I don't know that they're true. I mean, the issue of the mock-ups and the issue of targeting civilians. I mean, I think that this was definitely an attack on civilians. I'm not sure who did it, but it was definitely an attack on civilians. My client says that he was involved in it, and that's fine with me. But I think in order to accomplish their goals, they had to attack civilians. I don't think it was going to work to keep bombing the USS Cole. It didn't work.
Yeah, that's a very accurate point. A book that I found invaluable, Knowing the Enemy, by Mary Habeck, talks about the mindset of the jihadists. And she points out that one of the problems in analyzing the events of 9/11 is that Western analysts tend to talk to each other, and they pay no attention at all to what the jihadists themselves are saying. A Marxist might say, well, you know, everything reduces to the West's imperialism and colonialism and whatnot. And someone on the right might say, well, you know, these people are simply benighted. They're barbarians. I mean, they have this medieval concept. They want to restore the caliphate. And how can you deal with such people? But the jihadis themselves have a very comprehensive ideology. It was enunciated by Sayyid Qutb and the Muslim Brotherhood going back to the 1920s. They see themselves as engaged in purifying Islam. They feel that Western influences are responsible for bringing Islam to its current state. Why don't we listen to them? Why don't we hear what they're trying to tell us?
I think it's largely because we characterize them for what we think that they're saying rather than what they're really saying. But you know, I would also disagree with the fundamental premise of the book. First of all, I'm not sure that the people that I've been dealing with are jihadists, and I don't know that they're the enemy. I would say that they are more of our allies than our own government is. And I think that they did us a favor on September 11th, but it's one that we declined to accept.
See, that's something that's hard for me to understand. They did us a favor. Now, obviously, there are people who are going to be jumping up saying, well, they killed 3,000 innocent people. What kind of favor is that?
They didn't kill 300,000, they didn't kill 3 million, and they didn't kill 30 million.
Could they have? I mean,
I don't know.
Give them a nuclear warhead, and I think they'd be willing to try again.
I'm not sure that that's the case, but it's possible that they would. I don't know.
We hope that you found this first installment of our discussion of the Guantanamo detainees stimulating and perhaps irritating. My thanks to Scott FENSTERMAKER.
You're welcome.
We'll see you again for part 2. Once again, on behalf of Hardfire, I'm Ronald WIECK. Thank you so much for joining us. Good night.